Well, we just really didn't know anything, did we? Hey guys, it's Jules here with True Crime Reactions. As most of the world already knows, Bryan Kohberger has been arrested as a suspect in the quadruple homicide that took place in Idaho when Kaylee and Maddie and Xana and Ethan all lost their lives. Now, most of us knew the details that we were going to hear here were most likely going to blow our mind because the police had us all talking and looking in the complete opposite direction of where they were actually looking, which spot on because the game that they played in this little situation obviously worked. I've gone over the 19 pages of this affidavit several times, so now I'm going to retell it to you without all of the repeated words, repeated sentences, and all the extra stuff. I'm going to try to give you the timeline of behavior from the very beginning of when the phone record has him at the King house multiple times prior to the incident, and all of the behaviors in all the timeline after the incident. Looking at all of it from A to Z is extremely interesting and makes me just go right back to what I've been saying this entire time. This was not a instantaneous idea for this person. I believe, and I'm going to repeat this, that his psychology courses, that his criminology courses, that him studying under all of these professors who are so renowned in the actual field of what he has immersed himself in, has all been him preparing for this. When they pulled cell phone data, they proved that his cell phone had been in the neighborhood of the King Roadhouse at least 12 times prior to this incident. All but one of those times in the dark. And he was also pulled over for a seatbelt violation 1.5 miles away from the King Roadhouse on August 21st. During one of his stalking sessions, he just gets pulled over by a cop and doesn't break a sweat, probably had a nice little friendly conversation, knowing exactly in his head why he was even in that area in the first place. Now, some people on YouTube have talked about how there's certain locations that he was at the same time that the victims were at. But this affidavit doesn't give us, oh, he was at a coffee shop at the same time that Kaylee was at a coffee shop. Or, oh, he was at the grocery store at the same time that Xana and Ethan went to go pick up food to cook for dinner one night. So I'm not positive where all of that kind of speculation is coming from. But at this point, the fact is, at least a dozen times with his phone turned on, he was there, stalking his victims for months prior to the incident. Because y'all need to remember, this took place on November the 13th, whenever the 911 call was made. Him being pulled over for his seatbelt was August 21st. That right there is 3 months. He moved to the Pullman area to go to college in like June. So this would have been 2 months after he moved there, and 3 months before the incident, he was already stalking the house. Now, on the night of the incident, this is how everyone's nights would have played out right before everything came together and exploded. According to Bethany, who is one of the surviving roommates and is the roommate that actually did have a bedroom on the very bottom floor, because we find out in this affidavit that Bethany was the only one down there because Dylan's room was actually on the second floor, the same floor that Xana and Ethan were found on. Now, I did watch Truth and Transparency's video about the fact that this is what it was. Dylan did not live downstairs. She lived on the second floor quite a few weeks ago. According to this, Bethany, who is one of the surviving roommates, actually is the one who saw Xana and Ethan at the Sigma party earlier on in that evening. And she's also the one who told law enforcement that Xana and Ethan had gotten home around 1:45. Now, the information about Kaylee and Maddie getting back at 1:56, we already know was proven by the family. It's all proof that for sure everyone that lived at the King Road house was in the house by 2 a.m., no later. Now, we know that sometime between 2:40 and 2:52 or 2:58-ish, that Kaylee and Maddie were back-to-back calling Jack D's cell phone. Now, around this exact same time, Bryan Kohberger was leaving his apartment. He actually, per his GPS data on his phone and the way that it was connecting to the networks and bouncing off the cell towers, shows that at 2:42 a.m., it was still at the apartment location in which Bryan Kohberger lived. At 2:47, he began to leave his apartment and his phone was disconnected from the network. His phone was not turned back on and connected back to his AT&T network until 4:48 in the morning. Now, between that 2:47 and that 4:48, he was on his way to the King Road house, like he had driven to more than a dozen times prior to this night. He probably could get there with his eyes closed at this point. All of the footage that they have from cameras in the neighborhood of the King Road house have him driving around back and forth in front of the house at least 3 times between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m. Now, on this 4th time through the neighborhood, it seems to be whenever he decided to finally stop and implement his plan. But I find it interesting that with all of the addresses and directions of movement and all of the details in this affidavit, it doesn't give us the address in which he actually parked. I'm actually going to read the excerpt from the affidavit so that I can make sure that I'm not missing it, because I don't see an address in which he parked and a timestamp length in which the car was not driving around the neighborhood. Suspect Vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04 a.m. It can be seen driving eastbound on King Road, stopping and turning around in front of 500 Queen Road, and then driving back westbound on King. When Suspect Vehicle 1 is in front of the King Road residence, it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. The vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen and King, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen. And then all it states after that is Suspect Vehicle 1 is next seen departing the area of the King Road residence at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. So what about where the car parked? Did it park? If he was the one driving his own vehicle and he was by himself, the car would have had to have stopped and parked. So I do find it interesting, even though it could literally mean nothing, that they only talk about the car coming into the neighborhood at 4:04 and leaving the neighborhood at 4:20, U-turn and 3-point turns, and he went this way and he went that way, but no, car parked in front of insert street number here, Queen or King Road, for approximately 17 minutes. It's a little strange. Now, during this 4:04 to 4:20 time period, the new information that we actually have about the activity inside of the home is interesting, because it seems as if Xana actually ordered DoorDash around 4 a.m. and cellular data shows that her TikTok was active at 4:12. 4:12. Literally in the middle of what was most likely going on the 3rd floor. This is where pretty much the entire world has been thrown for a loop, because we get very detailed information about one of the surviving roommates, first-hand accounts about what actually happened, because it turns out she looked this man straight in the face. And this is the most confusing part of this entire thing, because at this point, we know that she came face to face with Bryan, or what we are suspecting to be Bryan, around 4:17 in the morning. But we also know that the 911 call didn't happen until almost noon, 8 hours later. Now, I'm going to have to hear some serious excuses for that situation, or she's going to have to be actually physically passed out from fear, because that makes no sense to me. And I'm not trying to sit here and victim shame anyone, okay? But once we go through the details of everything that Dylan is claiming that she heard that night prior to coming face to face with him, there's literally no reason to have not called someone. So per this affidavit, Dylan is claiming, and remember now, she's not on the first floor. She is on the second floor, which is the exact same floor in which Xana and Ethan were that night. It's where Xana's room is. She claims that around 4 o'clock in the morning, she heard some noises upstairs. She kind of thought that it was just Kaylee playing with Murphy. And then a few minutes later, she claims to have heard what she believes to be Kaylee saying, "There's someone in here." Now, this could have actually been Xana. But at this point is whenever Dylan got up for the first time and opened the door, looked outside of her room down into the hallway, and didn't see anything going on out there. The next part is where things get really disturbing, because we know that she just heard someone say, "There's someone in here." Now she hears crying coming from Xana's room. She also hears a male voice that she does not recognize say the words, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Now, some people think that this could possibly be Ethan mentioning this to Xana, but I think at this point, Dylan would have most likely recognized Ethan's voice. So, in my brain, and this might be a little much for people, but this is how I'm seeing this because of what we know so far about Bryan Kohberger. I envision him standing over one of his victims as they're about to take their last breath and they're probably pleading for help. His ego and his screwed up brain lets those words come out of his mouth as he finishes what he started. That's what I see that statement coming from. And I could be wrong, but that's what I see from this guy. It's in the eyes. Tell me I'm wrong. Now, when she hears crying coming from the direction of Xana's room is whenever she opens the door again. And this time is whenever she comes face to face with Bryan. And again, who we are suspecting to be Bryan. A man who's tall, athletic built, dressed in all black with a mask showing nothing but bushy eyebrows, walking directly towards her. And then he just nonchalantly gates his way out of the sliding glass door on the second floor. And this is where it states that she was frozen in fear and then went back into her room and slammed the door shut, basically locking herself in her room, which I completely understand. But for 8 hours, I'm not going to just be okay with the stories going around social media, especially since they're not verified. A lot of people are posting about this Facebook post that is apparently from someone who knows Dylan, saying that she has PTSD and night terrors, and she wasn't actually sure if what she saw was real or not. For 8 hours? The dog is barking his head off. You heard a multitude of things, and you didn't do anything for 8 hours? Not even come outside after you've calmed down a little bit and check the scene? 8 hours? And again, I am not trying to victim blame or shame or any of that crap that a lot of people try to always throw out there when someone has a difference of opinion. But unless she was the unconscious person that the 911 call was actually made for, 8 hours? I don't know, guys. And I'm not saying that that means that she's guilty of anything. Me having a question about someone's behavior does not mean that I think, or anyone else who has those questions might think, that this person could be involved in this situation. I just find the behavior strange. And then you also have to think, she came face to face with him right after he just finished whatever he did to Xana and Ethan on that second floor. If she would have called 911 just simply about there being a masked man in all black in their freaking house and the cops would have showed up, who's to say someone's life couldn't have been saved? It's always a possibility. And that's where I go to with this. I have PTSD. Lots of people do. And like I said, 8 hours? If she's the passed out person, okay. But if not, I know she's going to have a hard time dealing with that in her own head. And that's just the sad reality of this. Now at 4:20, the Hyundai Elantra is seen speeding at very high speeds out of the neighborhood. And then, of course, we know that his cell phone comes back onto network about 28 minutes later at 4:48. And the road that is taken at such high speeds out of the area leads straight to Pullman. Now, this is something that gives me a whole lot of pause when I look at what they state when it comes to the route that Bryan took from the Moscow home to his own place of residence back in Pullman. Because we know it's a straight shot, one main road, and it's like a 10-ish minute drive, okay? But he went a hella long way around just to get back to his area of residence. So he would have left the area of the King Roadhouse around 4:20 in the morning. And like I've mentioned, his phone didn't come back onto the AT&T network until 4:48. Well, whenever it popped back up on the network, he was over here in Blaine, Idaho, according to this affidavit. Then they were able to track him by cell tower from Blaine, Idaho, down to, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Genesee, Idaho, between 4:50 and 5:26 a.m. And then at 5:27-ish is whenever his cell phone hits a tower closer to his place of residence, putting him home sometime around that 5:27, 5:30 mark. The security camera that last tracked him at 5:27 was only 3/4 of a mile from his residence. So yeah, he got home around 5:30. And this affidavit does show that the same route that he took, that extremely long, exaggerated, for no reason out the way route that he took on the way back, was done again between 5:30 and 8:30 that same night. So I'm wondering how many of these additional miles have been searched already for the weapon. Now, we know from Bryan Kohberger that several boxes of evidence was not only taken out of his parents' home where he was arrested, but also from his workspace at the college and from his little apartment that was basically on the Washington State University campus. Now, as for what evidence was taken out, we have no idea. We just know several boxes. But for someone to drive this far out of their way and make a 10-ish minute trip last well over an hour, for what? I'm hoping they're doing some sort of searching, but that's pretty big of an area to be looking for a knife. But then guess what else this psychopath does? Not 5 hours after committing these crimes, he jumps back in his white Hyundai Elantra and drives back to the crime scene. Now, this is being timestamped as him leaving his apartment around 9 a.m., that exact same frickin' morning, you guys, getting back to the area where the cell towers hit his phone in the King Road area at 9:12, and then getting back to his apartment around 9:32. Now, his phone apparently pings in that area twice, at 9:12 and at 9:21. You have to wonder what his thought process might have been like when he pulled back up to what he damn well knew was a horrific crime scene a whole 5 hours after he looked someone straight in their face as he walked out of that house, and there was no cops, no crime scene tape, nothing happening. Now, go back to the fact that we do have an unverified rumor of that front door being open. And you have to wonder, did he go back in the house? It seems very strange to me that with all of the thousands of dollars in tuition this guy has paid, and the thousands of hours that he has spent in all of these classes and in all these different colleges trying to perfect his way of thinking, that he would accidentally leave the knife sheath right next to the right side of the body of one of his very first victims of that night. Now, it's very possible that in the struggle of the attack between Bryan and Kaylee and Maddie, that it was just accidentally dropped. And because it was in the nighttime hours and most likely most of the lights in the house were off, he might just not have realized that he dropped it. But what if that's not the case? What if he went in and planted it there because there wasn't any chaos happening the way he was hoping it would have been happening whenever he went back to the scene. Because he didn't go back 5 hours later and expect to see nothing, you guys. He expected to be able to sit there and drive by his very own Law and Order SVU episode, okay? That's what this guy was expecting to see, and that wasn't the case. But it seems like, with the time frame that we're getting here, he was basically in and out of that house and was able to take the lives of 4 people while locking a dog away in a bedroom behind a door in 16-ish minutes. Now, we originally thought that they had only really been tracking him for about 4 days prior to his arrest, but from everything I'm reading in this, they had Bryan's name on November the 29th. That's just 16 days after the incident took place. A Washington State University officer actually decided to search their system to see if there was any vehicles matching the description registered to the college. And of course, we know that he found one. Another officer later the exact same day actually seeing his car parked there, right then and there. And then of course, that's whenever the ball started rolling. Pulling the plates, grabbing the information, running his information, finding his background, getting the cell phone records, all of the things. It all started with someone at his college just doing their job. Now, when it comes to the DNA, I don't know why even mainstream media has mentioned thousands of times that the match came from some sort of ancestral type stuff, like those 23andMe type companies, because that's not what this affidavit says at all. We know that the DNA that was found at the scene was actually in the snap button of the knife sheath that was found. And what we're understanding is that agents pretended to be garbage men and basically matched DNA that they found in a trash can that belonged to the residence of Bryan's parents to the sample that they had at the scene. And the DNA found in the trash can was said to be, without a doubt, the father of the person whose DNA was considered to be the suspect's DNA in this crime. And yeah, it wasn't Ancestry.com or 23andMe or whatever. It was just regular forensics. But that's about all of the actual factual details that we have pertaining to this affidavit. Once we get some more information, you know I'm going to be right back on your screen. But until law enforcement releases something that has substance and stance, that's it. See y'all.